Start recording. It's Bubba. My nickname's Bubba. I'm all Bubba. Oh yeah, I got a lot of notifications during this. That was my bad. Usually I have streamer mode enabled, but I didn't for this, just because I wanted to see Sapphire's name right here. But in return, I got like 30 notifications during the debate, but I just had to work with it. So I do things like this, like debates and whatnot, on my YouTube channel. I'm working on making a TikTok, but I'm lazy, and that's about it for Bubba.
Gotcha. Now, with the format today, we do have some rules. We did go through those prior to the debate, but I'll just read through those just so there's no confusion. Introduction and closing statements, there's no over-talking, so please allow the person doing their introduction or closing statement to have full control over their time. Just don't say anything, right? It's their time. The cross-exam rules are really simple. Each debater just says, hey, I want my time back, or I'm reclaiming my time, and you get your time back. You're in full control over your portion of the cross-exam, so maintain control over your portion of your cross-exam. We did put together some clarification and clock draining rules. Let's avoid using those if possible, but if we have to, we can dip into some additional time that we set aside for that. The cross-examination protocol, do not ask a bunch of questions during the other person's cross-exam.
Let's keep that in mind. And also, timestamp. I want to cut back to every single time that... to 27. No asking questions during other person's cross-exam. Let's keep that in mind. Let's see how many questions I ask during his cross-exam, and how many questions he asks me during my cross-exam.
It's your cross-exam, you're the one asking questions. The cross-examinee is not asking a bunch of questions besides maybe short clarifying questions, so just don't waste a lot of time in that, right? If you have to clarify something.
Short clarifying questions are okay.
Like, if you have to clarify a term, it's usually pretty quick to define the term, right? So just be reasonable with your clarification time there. I prefer not to dip into the clarification and clock draining time, right? Interruption etiquette. If you do have to interrupt for clarification or something, say, may I interrupt? Do you mind if I jump in? May I provide input? Be polite about it. Remember, you guys are not enemies here. We're trying to have a productive debate. You're not trying to yell at each other or cuss each other out or anything. Let's be polite, right? Engage respectfully. Continuous interruptions or over-talking may lead to the use of moderation tools to ensure fairness. The goal is to protect the speaking time of both the affirmative and negative. I'm going to strive
Oh, that's an editing mistake.
to remain an unbiased moderator throughout the debate. It's my job to make sure I don't care who wins the debate and make sure it's moderated fairly, right?
I believe that Taco did a good job. He didn't need to interrupt very much, like he had to with my last debate. Like, I'm pretty sure when I was editing this, you could see Taco only interrupted during my cross-exam twice, and he didn't interrupt at all during Sapphire's cross-exam. But I think that there's a very... Just so people who don't know, who aren't on the server understand, Taco is like a very heavy atheist. So he really doesn't care who's right here. He doesn't give a shit about me or Sapphire being correct in this debate. So he has no stakes here, apart from just like, I asked him to host the debate, and Sapphire agreed to it. So all the complaints that Sapphire makes about Taco after the fact, he should have made before.
But let me know when you guys are ready. We'll go ahead and start the 10-minute timer for the first introduction, or the introduction for Sapphire Scribe, who is Hardlight Network on YouTube.
Alrighty, yeah, I'm ready. Are you ready, Bubba?
Cool. I'm starting your timer right now. You have 10 minutes.
Excellent. All right, so first I'd like to start off by defining deism as I'm arguing against it today. Deism believes in an impersonal God who created the universe and left it and does not sustain the universe.
Okay, I want to make that... I'm going to make notes right here about everything that he says. Deism equals impersonal God, which does not sustain the universe.
I'm not positively arguing for why God gives revelation or does miracles, but
That's fine. That's actually one of the... I think I made few mistakes during this debate. One of those mistakes was like Sapphire, but I don't think it's a big deal, but one of the sort of mistakes that I made was that Sapphire makes very clear right here that he's not arguing divine revelation. He's not arguing divine revelation or miracles. That's fine. But the thing is, I have things to say about divine revelation and not miracles, but revelation and prayer during my cross-exam. And he kept... But the thing is, if I'm asking you questions during cross-exam and you refuse to answer, then all that does is show kind of the weakness on your unwillingness to answer the questions that I have. But that's something I do get into later.
I'm actually arguing for why God sustains the universe, as deism rejects that God sustains the universe. First, I'd like to say that there are...
He's arguing for why... Let me categorize. Sapphire opening. He's saying, let me go back and see what he said.
But I'm actually arguing for why God sustains the universe, as deism rejects that God sustains the universe.
Okay. So he's arguing for why God sustains the universe. Okay. I can get behind that. He's saying that it is necessary for God to sustain the universe. That is what makes God relational, which is the topic of the debate, by the way. The question here is God relational? And Sapphire says it's necessary because God must sustain the universe. Gotcha.
First, I'd like to say that there are two ways that things are preserved. There are two ways that something can be preserved or kept from ceasing to exist: indirectly or accidentally. This happens when something is protected from destruction by external.
So two ways things can be preserved. Indirectly. He says, I remember his intro. He says indirectly and directly.
Means. For example, a child is preserved from harm if someone prevents them from falling into a fire. In this way, God sometimes preserves things from destruction, but not all things require this kind of preservation, since some things are incorruptible by nature. There is also directly or essentially as a means of preservation, and this applies when something depends entirely on another for its very existence. In such cases, if the cause stopped acting, the thing would immediately cease to exist. All created things fall into this category.
Okay, so I got this wrong. It's not indirectly and directly, it's indirectly and essentially. Or necessarily. And I want to go back and I want to kind of define the terms that he's saying here. Or indirectly. So indirectly sustaining something means...
It's also directly or essentially as a means of preservation, and this applies when something depends entirely on another for its very existence. In such cases, if the cause...
He actually did say directly, so I'm going to take that back. Okay.
Stop acting, the thing would immediately cease to exist. When something depends entirely on another for its very existence, things from destruction. But not all things require this kind of preservation if someone prevents them from falling into a fire. So when something is protected from destruction by external means. For example, a child is preserved from harm if someone prevents arguing for why God sustains the universe, as deism rejects that God sustains the universe. First, I'd like to say that there are two ways that things are preserved. There are two ways that something can be preserved or kept from ceasing to exist: indirectly or accidentally. This happens when something is protected from destruction by external means. For example, a child is preserved...
Okay. Protected from destruction. Externally. And then he says that directly is completely dependent on. If you stop sustaining it, it will cease to exist. I don't know if he means immediately or if he means... I don't know if he means like it'll immediately, like instantly stop existing. I do think he means that because he uses the example of the light bulb and the light. And the thing is, I agree. I think that the universe is this, not this. But throughout his cross-exam, he goes on to really pigeonhole me and to try and to show me why this must be the case. And I reject that premise, and it's not falsifiable to say that.
From harm if someone prevents them from falling into a fire. In this way, God sometimes preserves things from destruction, but not all things require this kind of preservation, since some things are incorruptible by nature. There is also directly or essentially as a means of preservation, and this applies when something depends entirely on another for its very existence. In such cases, if the cause stopped acting, the thing would immediately cease to exist. All created things fall into this category. They only exist because God actively maintains them. Without God's continued action, all things would vanish instantly. There's also a difference between becoming and being. Every effect depends upon its cause, but in different ways. Some causes only bring things into existence, but do not need to sustain them afterward. For example, a builder constructs a house, but once built, the house remains standing due to the nature of its materials, wood, stone, cement, etc., not because the builder keeps working on it. Similarly, a cook heats food, but the food stays warm for a while even after being removed from the fire.
Okay.
However, other causes must continuously act to keep something in existence. For example, light in the air depends entirely on the presence of the sun.
Okay.
If the sun's light disappears, the air immediately becomes dark.
Yeah, and this is where I get confused. Maybe he makes it more clear in his cross-exam because as far as I understand it, I haven't rewatched the whole debate yet, except for right now. But he believes that the universe is like this. God must sustain it in order for it to be sustained. He must continually be sustaining it. Well, I believe that the universe is more likely, I don't assert either or. Technically, I am actually asserting this, but I believe that it's more likely that God is indirectly sustaining the universe. He is like the builder and the house. As Sapphire just said, the building is being sustained by the materials, the bricks, and the everything else. But just because it's the nature of the bricks and the steel and the wood to be able to sustain itself into a structure.
Unlike the house, which remains standing due to its structure, light in the air does not persist on its own, but is entirely dependent on an external source. God is the kind of cause that must sustain his creation constantly, not just bring it into being and leave it to exist independently. If God stopped sustaining something, it would return to nothingness.
Okay, I want to write that down because I want to make very clear what he's saying. Why? I want to see his case as to why this must be the case. Must be. Let's see. I always want the because after. Be directly sustained because.
Just as air would immediately become dark if sunlight disappeared. To further clarify this idea, the text gives the following example: fire and heat. Water can absorb and retain heat from fire. Even after the fire is removed, the water remains warm for a while. This is because water has the capacity to hold the heat.
He's being kind of tautological there, just by he's just being he's just repeating the same analogy that he just said. He says that the universe needs God to sustain it because heat is reliant on fire, and without fire, heat ceases to exist. Well, not that. It's actually more like light is required. Sorry, the sun is required for light to exist. Okay, why is the universe dependent on God? Oh, it's because it's like the sun is required on light to exist. He isn't really giving a logical reason why so far, but let's see.
Even if imperfectly. In contrast, air does not retain light once the sun is gone. The moment sunlight disappears, darkness immediately takes over because light has no root in the air itself. This is used as an analogy for creation. Creatures do not contain existence within themselves as permanent property. They need God's continual presence to remain in being.
He's just restating his premise. I don't get it. I'm looking for the because. The universe and all creation must be directly sustained because.
If he withdrew his sustaining power, they would instantly cease to exist, just as the air loses light when the sun is gone.
What's his case for this? I don't get it. I'm sure that people will watch this video later and be like, Bubba just doesn't get it. He's stupid. He keeps on saying it over and over again. Yeah, because he hasn't stated anything. He just keeps on saying that God is needed, God is required to sustain his creation. And he needs it because its creation needs to be sustained because they need to be sustained. And it's like, how do you know that?
Deism assumes that God is the cause of the, quote, becoming of the universe, and not its being necessarily.
Sapphire confused me in the debate here because he kept on asking me whether or not I believe that God is... What did he just say? It was the source, right?
Why? Deism assumes that God is the cause of the, quote, becoming of the universe.
Okay, yeah, that's correct. What he just said is correct. Deism believes that God is the cause of all being. He keeps on using the word source. And that kind of confused me a little bit during the debate.
And not its being necessarily. Why? Because if God were the source of existence, being itself, then, subsequently, God would be the sustainer of the universe as...
So I still don't know why the universe must be directly sustained, but let's see. He says the universe and all creation must not, or cannot, be indirectly sustained because... Let's see, go back.
Because if God were the source of existence, being itself, then, subsequently, God would be the sustainer of the universe as existence itself simultaneously depends on him.
Because the universe itself depends entirely on him. It depends entirely on him to cause the universe into being. I'm pretty sure I said this during the cross exam, so I'll skip over it.
Cannot be both the sustainer, one giving the substance, and the one being sustained. Things cannot sustain their own being, and only their becoming because they are not the source of their own being.
Let's see.
Self simultaneously depends on him. One cannot be both the sustainer, one giving the substance, and the one being sustained. Things cannot sustain their own being, and only their becoming because they are not the source of their own being.
Yeah, that's just unfalsifiable. You can't prove or disprove whether or not God's creation, or let's say human beings, you can't prove or disprove whether or not humans can sustain their own being. And it's kind of stupid to say that you can or can't prove that. And he hasn't made a logical case for it. He just says that the universe and all creation must be directly sustained because it's just like the sun and a light. If the sun ceases to exist and then all the light ceases to exist as well. But he hasn't given a case for that for the universe. He just says the universe is like the sun and the light. He's being tautological, I suppose. I'm pretty sure this is the end of his intro. He just goes on to thank a couple people.
Ultimately, like I said, the focus of this debate is about God's relation in terms of sustaining the universe. I am arguing positively against this watchmaker sort of idea that deism holds to.
Yeah, that's correct.
Deism being a proponent of a impersonal, inactive God cannot possibly be the case, as I've laid out here in my previous argument. So, just to reiterate, I'm not talking about miracles. I'm not talking about revelation.
Yeah, this is where I kind of felt like a dickhead during the debate. He said he didn't come to talk about miracles, didn't come to talk about revelation. I had notes about revelation and revelation prepared, and I get into that it's the last part of my cross exam. And I felt like a dick, but it's kind of the rules of the road. Like, if you're not here to talk about it during your cross exam, well, I'm here to talk about it during my cross exam. So, sorry, that's how it works.
What we're talking about is a fundamental sustaining of being rather than an act of creation in and of itself. And, I appreciate you guys.
I'm sorry if you can hear all the clicking in the background on my video. It's because when I type, I'm typing down everything Sapphire is saying. Like, look, I am paying attention. I have my notes right here. Look. Oh, whoops. I need to move this. All my notes that Sapphire said were right here. Right? This was... Oops, I'll make this all the way big. Look. This was my notes that I took during Sapphire's intro. So I wasn't not paying attention or pleading ignorance. Like, he even said, like, look, he's going to say that he appreciates Apophatic for preparing him.
You guys invited me up here for this. It's good to have an opportunity to debate this. I'm looking forward to see what Bubba has to say in response. But I think... Let me go over my notes here and see if that's all that I have for this. That's going to be it. The last thing I'd like to say for my last part is I appreciate Apophatic for helping me prep and study for the debate.
Yeah, I was paying attention. I wasn't pleading ignorance whenever I was saying, like, I just rejected this premise. And God is the becoming. Yeah, like, see, God is the becoming, not the being of the universe. Like, these are all the notes I was taking in the moment. When you're on the debate stage, it's really hard to just remember everything that the man said. So at the expense of hearing all the clickety-clack typing, I was taking notes about everything that Sapphire said.
Sources such as the Summa Theologiae were excellent and informative. They were edifying, not beyond.
I can skip this. Where's mine's at 10:05. I could skip my intro. I'll lay out exactly what my plan in the debate was when it's my turn.
Up there for a second. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Oh, all right. I'm starting your timer right now. You have 30 minutes.
All right. So, first and foremost, just as a quick statement to outline it, my argument is positive.
Again, so that was the end of Sapphire's intro. I still don't get what his logical reason for God must sustain his creation is. And if I were to redo the debate, I would really press him, I suppose, on why that must be the case. It's something that I hope I get better at in my next formal debate. But yeah, if I would just ask him, why is it so necessary that God must sustain his creation? I would say it's unfalsifiable for me to say that God and the universe are like the builder and the building, in the same way that it's unfalsifiable to prove that God is like the sun and the light.
Against the deistic worldview, and in terms of how God is relational, it's not about divine revelation, and I'm not going into tag. It's about the sustaining of the universe. So my first question to you would be: do you actually believe in a God that sustains the universe? How would that work, given that your God is impersonal?
What did I say? I believe that the creator of the universe is what we would define as a deity, which deity, of course, means God. So yes, I do believe in a God, and I believe that he's impersonal. And are you asking why I believe that?
Follow-up question.
Okay, I didn't answer the sustain point, which is the point that he really wants to drive into me, is the whole sustaining point. And I didn't get it up to this point, but then I got it probably 60 seconds into his cross exam. He really wants me to say that God needs to sustain his creation.
Question: how would that God sustain the universe, and how would that be possible if your God is impersonal?
I believe that the universe is self-sustaining. Like, I believe that the way that the scientists describe the Big Bang and the way that rapid outward expansion, just through when the universe had a point in which it all began, both physically and in time, is accurate. I appeal to the consensus of the scientists, which know this stuff. Right. I like how I can outwardly just admit, like, oh yeah, I appeal to the consensus of the scientists. That's literally, if you were to really try and drill into me, which I know Sapphire, he's not a bad dude. We had kind of a bad falling out after this debate in the Discord call, but like Sapphire, he definitely wasn't bad faith, and I like to think I wasn't being bad faith here either. Just, he could, if he was bad faith, he would immediately say, oh, you're appealing to authority, you're appealing to consensus, you can't possibly know this shit. But he's not being bad faith, and he goes on to make his point.
So your argument is that when God created the universe, he instituted some sort of sustaining principle with the creation.
I'd say so. If it's possible, so it's possible that the universe one day is going to break apart into a million pieces because gravity wasn't finally.
Yeah, and this is kind of the part where Sapphire. Okay, I'll let me talk
In the correct way, but so far over the course of billions of years that hasn't happened. If it's possible, so it's possible that the universe one day is going to break apart into a million pieces because gravity wasn't finally tuned the correct way, but so far over the course of billions of years that hasn't happened yet.
So how does that not just kick the can down the road? Because if God created the universe with a sustaining principle, then wouldn't that mean God is sustaining the sustaining principle?
If I were to answer this now, knowing what his line of questioning leads to, I would say it's unfalsifiable to know that. It's unfalsifiable to know whether or not God put a sustaining principle into the universe, or if he is, like, hands-on sustaining it himself. But I believe it's more likely than not, and I have faith, I should say, that what the case actually is that the universe can self-sustain itself for a perhaps finite period of time.
Thus interacting with the creation?
The reason why it could be classified as kicking the can down the road is because it's not necessary, and when we're defining a creator God, to say that it's self-sustaining, that the universe must be self-sustaining. It's just that it is necessary for the creation of the universe that God had the ability to create it.
Yeah, I remember I said that because the title of the topic is it necessary for God to be relational? And I'm saying it's not necessary. It's possible that a creator, the point is that it is possible for a creator to create a creation, and then the creation is able to sustain itself for a finite period of time. So that means it's not necessary for God to sustain the creation itself.
But that was your response to the whether or not how God creates the universe. You said he created it with a self-sustaining principle.
I said it's possible. It's possible that the universe actually isn't self-sustaining, and in 10 billion years from now, gravity's going to fly all out of proportion, and we're all going to break apart into a million pieces. It's possible, but so far we're fine. So far that hasn't happened.
But remember, like I said in my opening statement, a thing can only sustain itself in its becoming, but not in its being, right? Because
yeah, this is where, like, the terminology threw me off, and I just needed to pretend like it didn't in the moment. I didn't really know what he meant by that.
your statement, a thing can only sustain itself in its becoming, but not in its being.
A thing can only sustain itself in its becoming. A thing can only sustain itself in its becoming and not in its being. I feel like that's something that Apophatic gave for him to say. Like, he's got a list of notes in front of him of things that he needs to get to. I kind of have something similar, but, like, I don't know what this statement means. Its becoming can only sustain itself on its becoming. I don't know what that means.
Right? Because the being of a thing deals with its form or with its essence. So the issue that we're having here is that you can describe, via science or whatever mechanism you'd like to, a how and a sort of physical creation. Like I said, builder building the house. But
Yeah.
the fact of the matter is that the being of the thing is not sustained by the builder itself.
Right.
So-
and the example that you used of the builder building the house takes the universe to be like the house. The house will stand on its own for hundreds of years, even if we were to never touch it.
So I want to go ahead. This is the first time I say it, so I'm going to start now. I want to make a tally of how many times I said this. The universe does not need to God, it is not necessary for God to sustain his own creation.
The builder doesn't have to interact with the house in order for it to stay in its structure. It could, like, don't get me wrong, it could, and this works in my paradigm because the house eventually, the bricks and the steel and the wood will eventually decay over hundreds, maybe thousands of years. But the fact is, the house can self-sustain itself for a long period of time.
Yep. I think it's more likely, since Sapphire is asking me the question, I think that it's more likely that the universe will either self-sustain itself, if that makes sense, for eternity, or it will fall apart after a long period of time. I believe that God is indirectly responsible for the universe being sustained, not directly. He believes this, I believe this.
Now, again, the builder is only the cause of the becoming, unlike God, who directly causes its being. So not specifically the house, but God, being the creator, directly causes the being of the creation.
Right.
Whereas the builder, being the builder, he causes the becoming of the building, but he
Okay.
is not the sustainer of the essence of the building.
Let me go back and listen to that.
Directly causes its being. So not specifically the house, but God, being the creator, directly causes the being of the creation.
Causes the being of the creation. Here's what I think I got from that. So, he must be directly sustained because... This is what I think he's saying.
Whereas the builder, being the builder, he causes the becoming of the building, but he is not the sustainer of the essence of the building.
Because the builder... and the build... I need to listen to that again.
Yeah.
As the builder, being the builder, he causes the becoming of the building, but he is not the sustainer of the essence of the building.
Yeah, I'd say you're right. Like, the structure of the building is made by the nature of the building itself.
Because remember that there's
Yeah, I'd say you're right. Like, the structure of the building is made by the nature of the building itself.
I outlined two modes of preservation: accidental and indirect,
Yep, okay.
and direct, essential preservation.
Direct essential. Yeah, you can immediately hear me typing down and taking notes because I'm trying to understand what he's saying. Direct and essential. Indirect and non-essential? Accidental.
And yeah, what about it? It's like, I'm not sure how it relates though. Like, sure, in the case of the house and the builder building the house, which of those are, what's being used there? Is it indirect or is it accidental, as you're trying to say?
I think the builder and the builder and the house is indirect and accidental being sustained, sort of. I think that's what he's trying to say. And direct and essential is like the sun and the light.
Directly, this applies when something depends entirely on another thing for its very existence.
Sure.
If the cause stopped acting,
This is the thing that I had to say about this statement.
this applies when something depends entirely on another thing for its very existence.
The universe does not depend entirely on God for it to continue to exist. The universe depends on God as a cause to exist. You can remove God. God can be dead right now. In deism, and to say God isn't relational means that God could die right now, and the universe could maintain its existence for perhaps a finite period of time. That's something that maybe I didn't make clear enough in the debate. Whoops. I hit the wrong button. Sorry. There we go.
The house and the builder building the house. Sure.
If the cause stopped acting, the thing would immediately cease to exist. All created things fall into this category.
Okay, because all created things fall into this category. I don't think that's true. Because, define creation. I think that a house is a creation, and it sustains itself without a builder for a very long time. If this is the case that he's making, and I knew it more clearly, then I could tear it down, break it apart, and eat it for dinner.
They only exist because God actively maintains them. Without God's continual action, the things would vanish instantly. That's my definition there for direct.
Yeah.
Okay, that's his definition for direct, and I can only assume it's what he believes is true about the universe. But I still have yet to see a case as to why. If this is the case, the universe and all creation must be directly sustained because all created things fall into this category. That is so easy to dismantle that, like, a preschooler could do it. My computer is a creation by a being, which is maintaining its creation by itself, on its own.
I just don't see that it's necessary that God needs to sustain his own creation in order for his creation to be sustained.
Okay, I say that. That's my second time saying this. 2. Oh, I keep hitting the button, sorry.
All created things fall into this category. They only exist because God actively maintains them.
I just don't see that it's necessary that God needs to sustain his own creation in order for his creation to be sustained. I think that the universe can sustain itself, even if it's for a finite amount of time. It still sustains itself nonetheless.
Nothing can sustain its own being. It can sustain the becoming of the being.
If I were to go back in time, I would say everything can sustain its own being on Earth. Every creation that man has ever made can sustain its own creation. Brick houses, buildings, this microphone is sustain its own being. I am not directly touching this microphone, but it will sustain its own being until it rots away after like 1,000 years.
The building
not
of the
being itself.
right, the building of the example that we use. I don't want to ask you questions in your time, but so I'll just assert that the building of the building. So when the builder builds a building, that's a tongue twister. Will
Notice that. I want people to understand, like, people who are saying that and being bad faith can go fuck yourself, because notice what I'm doing is I'm not asking him a question during his cross-examination. He does that to me dozens of times. Instead of asking a question, I consciously decided to just assert something that he can attack. I did that intentionally. Like, I'm making sort of an assertion that he can dismantle. So, like, let's hear it again.
Bill, so I don't want to ask you questions in your time, but so I'll just assert that the building of the building. So when the builder builds a building, that's a tongue twister, will sustain itself until it eventually decays and falls apart, unless it's maintained.
So again, God cannot grant to a creature to be preserved in a being after the cessation of the divine influence.
That's only assuming that God can... That's only presupposing that God grants sustainment unto his creation.
He can't make it to not have received its being from himself, right? That would violate
What did he say?
after the cessation of the divine influence. He can't make it to not have received its being from himself.
You can't make it to not have received its being from itself. God cannot make it so that the being did not...
Right? That would being after the cessation of the divine influence. He can't, again, God cannot grant to a creature to be preserved in a being after the cessation of the divine influence.
I'm having a hard time understanding what he's saying. Make it so that... God cannot make it so that...
He can't make God cannot grant to a creature to be preserved in a being after the cessation of the divine influence. He can't make it to not have received its being from himself.
He cannot make it to not have received its being from itself. Make it so that it did not receive its being from what?
Be preserved in a being after the cessation of the divine influence. He can't make it to not have received its being from himself.
Its being from himself. God cannot make it so that... Who?
Right? That would violate after the cessation of the divine influence. He can't make it to not have received its being from himself. Right? That would
To not have received... To not have received its being from himself. Okay. I think that what Sapphire's thinking about when he says this statement is like, has to do with life, but I don't know. This statement's kind of confusing. God cannot make it. Let me go back and make sure.
would being after the cessation of the divine influence. He can't make it to not have received its being from himself. Right? That would violate the law of non-contradiction.
What? Right when I called myself out for being good faith, I immediately asked him why.
You do subscribe. Well, you do subscribe that because it's a contradiction. You do subscribe to objective logic, right?
Well, I think that
Logic is objective.
I think that
Yeah, like logic falls into a transcendental category, which is this is where I have to run my script. You know, like logic is a transcendental category, which is a descriptive term which is used to describe the universe.
logic is what you would call transcendental, but it's a descriptive idea which we use to describe the universe. So we could.
But it's objective. It's discoverable. I also
Yes.
believe that's transcendental. So
Yes.
if logic being objective is incontrovertible, if it's objective, then that would necessitate that the laws of logic, as we know them, as we've discovered them, would be incontrovertible. So you would have to adhere to the law of non-contradiction. You can't have God create a thing that is not sustained by him, because he can't create a thing to not have been created by him.
He's just getting really taught to logic with this argument. He keeps repeating that over and over again, but he hasn't made a logical case for it. And again, I would press him on this if I were to go back in time and to understand a bit better, because he kept on asserting that he has made the argument over and over again, when in reality, he's just repeating himself without making a logical case other than all created things fall into this category. The universe and all its creation must be directly sustained. It must be directly and essentially sustained by its creator, because all things fall into this category. No. Like, no. That applies to... I can say that doesn't apply to so many things. That doesn't apply to every man-made creation on Earth. That doesn't apply to buildings. That doesn't apply... I don't even think that that applies to things like planets. Because I think that planets will eventually decay or get hit by an asteroid. It's not essential that they maintain their creation.
Right, but I don't see where the contradiction is in deism under that principle.
Because God is the source of all being, even in deism.
Yeah, God is the source, kind of like the watchmaker or the prime mover.
Yeah. I'm happy that I iterated that right in the moment, because Sapphire confuses me when he says that God is the source of all being. To be more accurate, I think it'd be easier to say that God is the cause of all being. He is the first cause.
And I don't, however, means that... I think that logic, for example, is self-sustaining. Like, logic is an objective truth, which can't really be broken in that way. And it doesn't need God to sustain it for it to be true.
But if he's the source of all being, then he has to continually act to maintain the being. Even
I don't believe that. I believe that God is the cause of all being. Not because source is such a broad term, so that's why I kind of refrain from using the word source.
if it's just a sustaining principle, like I said earlier, we kick the can down the road, what sustains the sustaining principle?
Are you asking what sustains God?
But no, you said in my previous question, your response was that
What sustains the sustaining principle? That's definitely a question that he had prepared from Apophatic. What sustains the sustaining principle? It'd be like the material itself, if I were to ask that question more directly, because I thought he was talking about God in that moment. So if I were to re-answer that question more directly, I would say the sustaining principle is the material of the universe itself. Just the nature of the universe. The essence of the universe is that, like, all the planets and systems and the light and the black holes, all that shit can sustain itself for perhaps, I can only guess, a finite period of time.
when God created the world, that he created it with a sustaining principle. But I mentioned that that just kicks the can down the road. So the question is, what would be sustaining the sustaining principle?
I think that it is possible for either the universe to be sustaining itself for eternity, or for one day the universe to fall apart and not be able to sustain itself anymore, much like the building. The building will either exist eternally, which unlikely, of course, or it will fall apart at one point. And I believe that the universe will.
I said that I would say it. There it is. I forgot how smart I am.
Fall apart. I personally believe that the universe will fall apart at one point, but it's unknown as to when.
And now, is that because the sustainer ceases to act? Because remember, the sustaining principle falling apart would imply that.
It could.
And now, is that because the sustainer ceases to act? Because remember, the sustaining principle falling apart would imply that.
If God ceases to exist, then the sustaining principle ceases to exist. I don't believe that God is sustaining the universe. That's what he keeps on not seeing. I think that God is the first cause of the universe, not something that's sustaining itself. In the same way, it's something that God is not something that is sustaining the universe.
It could, but the important part is that it's not necessary as to whether or not God is relational.
Number 3.
No, it is, because that is a God that is contrary to the claim of deism as a whole, being impersonal and not interacting with creation. If he does, in fact, sustain the creation, then that would violate this sort of deistic foundation. But on top
It would, but I don't believe that.
of that, back to my question about sustaining, because that's really the crux of my entire argument here.
Yeah, true.
It seems to me that it's necessarily the case that if the thing that is sustaining, whether it is God or this sustaining principle, ceases to sustain the thing, then the thing itself ceases.
That's only assuming that. He keeps on asserting that without any, he doesn't back up that argument at all. It just says that the universe. So far, all I've gotten is this, because all created things fall into this category, that they need to be direct and essential sustainment from its creation. No, that's not the case at all. Point to me a single thing. I can't even think of a thing that is the light in the sun. Okay, well, I don't believe that the universe is like the light in the sun. God is not the light bulb that is maintaining the universe's creation. The universe is more like the building, which all of its materials are holding it together.
It's incoherent to assert that a thing can exist apart. The thing being sustained can exist apart from the thing sustaining it.
And that's why I just reject that premise, just because.
I want to drop real quick the reason I'm wearing sunglasses. The reason I'm wearing sunglasses right now, and I wonder if you can see it, but I'm texting my friends at this moment. I'm in the group chat while Sapphire is berating me with questions, just messaging my homies. It's goofy to say, but I was in the group chat because my two very good friends met each other for the first time. They met each other for the first time in real life, and I'm so happy for them. And so while this debate was going on, I was dealing with this in the group chat, and I thought it was adorable.
under the necessary qualities which I gave to God in my opening statement. It's necessary for God to have the power of creation. It's necessary for God to have a mind, and it's necessary for God to exist outside of time and space. That's it. The creation doesn't need to be sustained, and in order for God doesn't need to have a relationship with its creation in order for the creation to be sustained.
Number
I just
4.
reject that premise on the basis that
I
like,
repeated myself, so 5.
that's not the necessary preconditions for any creator who creates a being, which at worst is a black swan fallacy, but which still is logical nonetheless.
Everything that has being simultaneously demands on God for their existence, or depends on God for their existence.
He just keeps on restating that. He has no logical argument as to why, other than all created things fall into this category.
So the problem that I'm having here is I don't think you're seeing the incoherence of your worldview here, because
this is like where I think it starts. He keeps on saying that my worldview is incoherent because I fail to see, but I don't see the reason I'm not seeing it is because there's nothing to fucking see. He hasn't made a logical case as to why the universe needs a direct and essential sustainer, and for it to be God, and why it must be God. I'm not seeing it.
The problem is, it's not about whether or not God created the world with a sustaining principle or God directly sustains it. Under your worldview, it is necessary that the God created the world, wound it up like a watch, and then set it off onto its own course.
Yep, that's under your. I'm gonna type that down. Under your worldview, God wound up its creation like a watch and set it onto its own course. I think this is the most accurate thing that he said about my worldview so far. Like, this is true. Like, yeah. God basically went flick, and then I think of it like a control panel. You know how the fine-tuning argument works so well? Or against atheists? Well, I'm a deist. I believe that God, basically, or some being that exists outside of time and space, set all the dials to be just right in order for the creation to sustain itself for however long, either eternally or for a finite period of time, and then just basically went flick. This is the most accurate thing that he has said about my worldview so far.
The problem with that is that God is the being that is necessary. It is the necessary cause for the effect of creation. Every effect depends upon its cause. Without the cause being maintained, what happens to the effect?
Yeah, the reason that there's such a stupid editing mistake here is because I was trying to turn off notifications because they were really bothering me.
Effect.
Can you kind of rephrase that question?
Yeah, because I'm busy.
That was me rephrasing it, because it goes back to the thing that is sustained.
It didn't work, by the way.
Is dependent upon the sustainer. And under your worldview, if the sustainer is a sustaining principle that God, this watchmaker God, built into the fabric of the universe when he created it, that doesn't resolve the issue. It just kicks the can down the road because it is necessary.
I don't think it kicks the... I'm going to state this now. It doesn't kick the can down the road just because I'm simply agnostic on the fact. I don't know. And it would be dishonest for me to say that either I do or that I do know. It would be dishonest for me to say that, so I don't believe it's necessary for God to sustain his creation. And that I do know, because all creations don't... I don't believe that the universe is like, and this is just based on my own faith, on my own trust, that my belief entails that God set the universe up to be able to sustain itself, and then basically just went like that. That's what I believe is the universe is like.
Necessary that the sustaining principle itself would be sustained by something. Every cause has its effect. You would agree with that, right? Every cause has its effect.
Let's see.
Sustaining principle itself, that doesn't resolve the issue. It just kicks the can down the road because it is necessary that the sustaining principle itself would be sustained by something.
It is necessary that the sustained principle itself were to be sustained by something. I want to type that down. Yeah, is sustained by something. I don't assert that there is some hidden sustaining principle that is the reason why the universe is holding on to itself, or why it hasn't fallen apart into nothingness. I believe that it's... So that's where that statement that he just made falls on its face. It is necessary that the sustained principle is being sustained by something. What is... And again, this statement falls into the same problem as this statement. What is the... how do you back that up? Like, what is the logical reason as to why you come to this conclusion. It is necessary that the sustained principle is being sustained by something. Okay, so take the builder and the building, for example. The building is being sustained by its materials, the bricks, the steel, the wood. And then what is sustaining the bricks, the steel, and the wood? It's just self-sustaining. It sustains itself.
Every cause has its effect. You would agree with that, right? Every cause has its effect.
Every cause has its effect. Yeah, I do. But I think
And every effect would be dependent on its cause, right?
every effect would be dependent on its cause.
It would. This is where I think I make the point.
Yes, but I think what the misunderstanding here is that you're trying to assert to me that God sustaining his creation is necessary, and I'm saying it's not necessary, which is why I don't believe, and that's the whole idea. You're trying to say that because God needs to be relational to his creation, and when he's relational, he's sustaining his creation. I'm saying that it's not necessary. It's totally possible that the creation will fall apart into a billion pieces, and
This is where I believe that Sapphire was. I'll address now that he seemed so nervous in the first half of this debate. Like, look at the way that he's swaying back and forth. And I have the video at double speed, but let's like look at like how fast he was actually talking. He was talking so slow
on its cause that I think with the misunderstanding here,
Right.
but I think with
And every effect would be dependent on its cause, right?
every effect would be dependent.
That's only one sentence that he said, but he was just he seemed so nervous during the first part of the debate. But it wasn't until I started getting him a little bit more heated during my cross-examination, when he started to get a little bit more passionate, when he really started to show his real Sapphire colors. Not in a bad way, just like his real confidence and his real assertion and his real aggression started to come out. And that's like, for this, it's like he didn't want to draw first blood. It's like he really didn't want to insult me or call me an idiot or press me like he normally would.
Dependent on its cause. Yes, but I think what the misunderstanding here is that you're trying to assert to me that God sustaining his creation is necessary, and I'm saying it's not necessary, which is why I don't believe, and that's the whole idea. You're trying to say that because God needs to be relational to his creation, and when he's relational, he's sustaining his creation. I'm saying that it's not necessary. It's totally possible that the creation will fall apart into a billion pieces, but what that entails is that it's still not necessary, which is the title of the debate.
Unfortunately, that's a straw man. And like I said in
All right, where's the straw man?
my opening, like I said, I gave the reasoning for why God needs to sustain.
Okay, I hope. Okay, so as I've seen so far, he has not given the reason as to why God must sustain. All he has said is because all he has said so far is that all created beings fall into this category. And then he keeps being really tautological by saying like, oh, because the universe is like the sun and the light. The universe is the light and God is the sun. And that this is the way that the universe is. And he keeps on asserting that, or things like that, or the light bulb and the light, whatever you want to say. And he doesn't have any logical reason to back it up. So I hope Sapphire, surely now, since I'm clearly not understanding you, I am the idiot here, clearly not understanding, he would say what the reason is up to this point as to why God must sustain his creation.
I didn't just say that it's necessary. I appealed to a shared belief in objective logic. I talked about
Because of the shared belief in objective logic.
I appealed to a shared belief that every cause has its effect, and that every effect.
Okay. Oops. Because every effect has its cause.
Is dependent. I gave the reasoning for why God needs to sustain. I didn't just say that it's necessary. I appealed to a shared belief in objective logic. I appealed to a shared belief that every cause has its effect, and that
every cause has its effect. Okay.
the effect is dependent on its cause. And now I'm demonstrating the incoherence of stating that just because you don't know that the universe could fall apart, that what I'm saying is the reason.
Okay, I don't know if he's going to say anything more than that, but oops. So far what we have is all created beings fall into this category because of his shared belief in objective logic. I don't know how logic is objective. Therefore, the universe is being sustained by God. The universe is being sustained by the person who created logic. I don't know if he's watching this if Sapphire's watching this in the future, he'll probably attack me for strawmanning that case. But dude, I don't. You're right. I don't get it. You're not making sense. So this one's interesting because every cause has its effect, and every effect is dependent on its cause. This, I think, is a point that I make very clear later. This is where all his preparation falls into pieces. Every effect is dependent on its cause in order to exist, not to be sustained. This fucking This fucking marker is dependent on me is dependent on its creator in order to exist. It is not dependent on its creator in order to be sustained. That's the prime crux of his argument destroyed in one statement. Oops.
Reason why the universe will fall apart is as if the necessary sustaining component, the God, ceases to act.
God, under my worldview, is not the necessary sustaining component. He's the necessary cause.
On the creation. And the reason why that's a problem for your deistic worldview is because you claim that God does not interact with the creation.
And yeah, I don't see as to why God must interact with his creation in order for it to sustain itself, if that's what you're saying. And the same way that most creations that beings make.
Yeah, like see how much Sapphire's fidgeting. He just looks so nervous during his own cross exam.
Are self-sustaining. The watchmaker, the builder building the building. Like I'm saying, I've been very
Every time he shook his head, he pissed me off. Not gonna lie, because I couldn't focus.
consistent with the point that like the universe could eventually fall apart and not be able to sustain itself at some point. All that proves is that God made a creation which wasn't sustainable, which wasn't self-sustainable.
Remember, I outlined two different modes of preservation, though.
Yep.
The
Indirect and direct.
indirect accidental, or the essential indirect, right?
See, I'm listening for all the people that say I'm fucking bad faith. I just repeated his own opening statement back to him.
Yeah, and you would be saying that God is essential. God is not essential under deism, but he is essential under theism and a relational God. And what you're providing to me right now is an external critique, which isn't going to really find any contradictions in my belief. It's just more or less going to be asserting yours onto mine.
Well, again, what I'm critiquing here, what I'm critiquing here. It's an internal critique. We're asking for an internal critique, and what I'm critiquing here is that, like I said in my opening statement,
Okay.
that God is the sustainer of the universe, unlike in the deistic worldview, where God does not sustain the universe. Rather,
Okay.
the deistic worldview leads to God being the cause of the becoming, rather than being the creator or the cause of the being itself.
Yeah, true. So what's the problem with that?
So, again, it's not about just interaction; it's about sustaining. But the sustaining is in and of itself an interaction. And again, it
Right.
doesn't. You're still not contending with the issue here as
He did like that was the part where he should have explained himself.
sustaining, but being itself.
What he said is deism is saying that God is like the watch and the watchmaker analogy, but why is that incoherent?
So, again, it's not about just interaction; it's about sustaining. But the sustaining is in and of
Because it's about sustaining.
itself an interaction. And again,
I don't believe that the universe needs God in order to be sustained.
it doesn't. You're still
I believe it needs God in order to be caused.
not contending with the issue here as far as the fact of the matter of something like a house falling apart 100 years, 200 years, whatever, after the builder built
That's what I believe the universe is like.
it. That's because the cause of the becoming of the building has ceased. It's because the cause of the being itself is not being sustained. It's because the thing that is sustained is dependent upon the thing sustaining it. Every cause has its effect. Every effect is dependent upon its cause.
I don't believe that this argument works because that would be implying that several builders could be the thing that are sustaining God. Or sorry, sustaining the building, right?
I think this is the time where I made the point.
But remember, some causes only bring things
I'm going to play this up until the point where I made the point that God is dependent to be the cause of the universe, not the sustainer.
into existence, but do not need to sustain them afterwards. The builder building the house example. Not because the builder keeps working on it. Similarly, a cook heats food, but the food stays warm for a while after it's removed from the fire. That would be the indirect accidental preservation. However, other causes must continuously act to keep something in existence. Remember the sun and the air analogy, or even we can use a light bulb in a room. Right? The room does not stay lit after you turn the light switch off because the air in the room does not sustain the light. It does.
Yeah, that's where I kept making the point in my cross exam that this is where Sapphire believes that the universe is like the light bulb and the light. I believe that the universe is like the builder and the building.
Doesn't have any root. The air doesn't have any root in the light. So it is necessary for the light in the room to be sustained by the external source.
Yeah, the heaviness of your argument is following on the necessity of being able to be sustained. Like how the light bulb is the light bulb is the thing that is sustaining the light. I don't believe that the universe is like this. It's not analogous because I say that the universe is more like the watchmaker or the builder, where they caused it. They're not sustaining it, but they caused it, and it's able to sustain itself for a fixed amount of time or for a finite amount of time, and then it's eventually going to decay into nothingness, and it's no longer going to exist. And I just feel I need to restate my premise again. Like I don't see the universe as like the light and the light bulb. It's not essential. It's not essential. It is non-essential, and therefore not a necessity.
Yep, I made that point. Like at that point, Sapphire had nothing else to say of substance. So that's like my sixth time kind of saying that, or sixth or seventh time, I don't even know. That is not necessary for God to sustain his creation. And just after that, he did say something in his final statements that I wanted to get to. So where did Taco speak up? Right here.
I don't think it's a matter of my own misunderstanding at this point.
Well, like I said, you've acknowledged that God is the source of all being.
Okay, so let's see what his final statement was. His final statement was interesting to me.
Acknowledged that he created
that's
everything. Awesome.
Go ahead and finish up your statement, and then we'll move on to the next one.
All right, well, you've acknowledged that God is the source of all.
I've acknowledged that. Oh, whoops. So this is why it was confusing for him to say that God is the source of all being. God is the cause of all being, to get more specific. God is the source of all being.
Of all being. You've acknowledged that he created ex nihilo. You've
Created ex nihilo. Oh, I'll just make the point here. I did not say that God created ex nihilo. And I should go back and find that, because when he talks about creating ex nihilo, I didn't know what ex nihilo meant, and I very quickly looked it up in the middle of the debate. I was like, what's ex nihilo? Oh, it's okay. It's creating something out of nothing. And so where was I? I was like here.
every cause has its effect. Every effect is dependent upon its cause.
I don't believe that this argument. I don't believe that this argument works because that would be.
Remember, builders continuously act to keep something in existence. Remember the off because the air in the room does not retain, it does not sustain
The light. I don't believe that the universe.
pre-existing matter. Then that means the things that he has created are necessary for him to have created them. He is the necessary sustainer of the things created.
Yeah, and because
wait, what
again,
did
you
you
keep trying
say?
to push the word sustain. Sustain isn't the topic of conversation. It's whether it's necessary for him to be relational, and you're trying to assert that being able to sustain means that it must be relational. And again, I don't see the universe as the light bulb in the light. I see the universe as like the builder in the building.
But that unfortunately is
Well, that's me saying it again. 8 or 9 times.
sustaining is the topic of the conversation. I outlined in my opening statement exactly how it applies.
What I mean by that, by the way, is I'm not insulting him as if I'm trying to disregard his intro. I'm saying that because the literal topic of the debate is God relational, not is God sustaining the universe.
And the course of the debate that I was going to be taking us down, and there weren't any objections up until this point.
Yeah, because I've been willing to hear you out to this point as to why sustaining would be necessary, and I've heard you at this point. It's that you
Well,
believe
we are debating deism. We are debating your deistic worldview. Like I said, I'm taking the affirmative stand.
Like, again, anyone who says that I'm bad faith, notice how he just completely interrupted me and I allowed him to continue. Like, I didn't just try to steamroll. Oh, shit. I didn't just try to steamroll him. I didn't just try to call him out for being a bitch. Any of that. Like, I was making a point, he interrupted me, and I just let him continue. I did this several times. I was very polite during his cross-exam.
Against your deistic worldview.
Yeah.
And like I said on the face of the debate, at the very front, in my opening, that I wasn't debating divine revelation, I wasn't debating tag. And the problem that I'm debating here is that in a deistic worldview, God creates it and then leaves it. He does not sustain it.
right, but see, it's not necessary for him to sustain it, and that's really where the brick wall is here, or where the misunderstanding is here. It's
But I had laid out the misunderstanding very clearly.
God sustaining his creation is not necessary because the universe could fall apart, as I've said a few times, and that's totally possible. All that means is that like the universe that he created was not sustainable.
Again, it is necessary because remember, you've already conceded. Every effect has its cause.
Okay, so this is he said that every effect has its cause. Where is it? Okay, because every cause has actually it's the other way around. Every cause has its effect. Oops, I got that wrong. Effect with an A. And every effect is dependent on its cause. Yeah, that's true. So that just means that God created the universe. And the cause of the universe is God's. The cause of the universe is God. God is not the sustainer, he's the creator, he is the cause. It is not necessary for God to be for a creation to be sustained by its creator.
Every effect is dependent upon its cause.
Yeah,
God is sustaining existence itself.
yeah, every effect is dependent on its cause in order for that effect.
And he still hasn't made okay, here's what I've laid out so far as to why that apparently is the case under his worldview. The universe and all creation must be directly sustained because by its creator, I should say. Must be directly sustained by its creator because all created things fall into this category because me and him have a shared belief in objective logic. Not sure what that has to do with shit, but okay. Because every cause has its effect. That's interesting. And I already laid out why. And every effect is dependent on its cause. And I made the example with the marker. Every effect is dependent on its cause in order to exist, not to continue existing, not to be sustained.
effect to exist, not to be sustained.
Boom! There it is! I love myself. Oh, I'm so narcissistic. I love myself.
That's
God,
yeah,
God
again,
is sustaining existence itself.
yeah, every effect is dependent on its cause in order for that effect to exist, not to be sustained. It's the universe was caused by God, but it's not necessary for that cause to be sustained in order for the fact that it was still created and it
You
exists.
just said it's necessary for it to exist. That's sustaining.
To exist, not to continue existing forever.
To exist at all. Because remember, the only reason it ceases to exist is because the sustain.
That's the part that's like clearly going over Sapphire's head because look how he look how much he just smiled just now because he thought I conceded to a point. Like no, like, and I made clear like, yeah.
Ceases, not because there was a built-in predetermined point at which it would not exist. A cause does not cause a non-effect.
A cause does not cause anything other than an effect. Okay. A cause does not cause anything other than an effect. Okay, I can agree with that.
It's the build, and this is why like I'll say maybe a fourth or a fifth time, and it's that the universe is not like the universe is the builder in the building. The builder does not need to sustain the building. The building can just exist and
How many is that actually? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's my 10th time. I said 4 or 5 times. It was my 10th time saying it.
itself on its own, and that's where there's still a disconnect here somehow. And unless you, I think that you just don't agree, and that's why you keep pressing me on this
No,
issue.
well, that's exactly the issue. Because remember, the builder analogy only works if God doesn't create ex nihilo.
Okay, so ex nihilo. This is the last point that I wanted to hear him say. I don't get it. His other point, it only works if God doesn't create ex nihilo. Ex nihilo means to create something out of nothing.
Sure. Well, in the case that's where the God creating the universe is different than the builder creating the building, because yeah, right. But I don't. And it's also not at the same time because I don't know what
This is why he thinks I conceded. I get it now because he thought I was completely agreeing with. In the time where I was making this explanation, I was actually typing on the side like, "What is ex nihilo?"
method of creation was for God. If he really did create ex nihilo, maybe he did. I don't know. But
Yeah. This all I'm saying here is that the method on which God, I don't know whether or not God created ex nihilo. But he makes a good point later, and he says that, okay, if you're saying that God didn't create ex nihilo, then that means that the universe is eternal. And all material things are eternal because they didn't have a creation. I'm like, oh, okay, that actually makes sense.
for
But when I pressed you on it, you did concede to that.
How so?
The uncaused cause.
yeah, the uncaused necessary.
necessary.
Yeah, the uncaused necessary cause of the universe. I believe the universe did have a starting point at some point, and there had to be something that caused it, but nothing existed at the same time. So what caused it? I believe it was God.
If God only started the becoming of the universe and not the being of the universe, it means that the form already existed before the becoming.
Not exactly. All it means is that the existence could eventually evaporate into nothingness eventually, and it just could sustain itself for a finite period of time.
Just under 5 minutes.
It would mean that
I think that was the last point
the
of ex
universe
nihilo.
is also an uncaused cause in your world.
Well, the universe itself, I think that he's trying to say that if I don't believe that the universe was created ex nihilo, then that means that the universe is in itself an uncaused cause. No, I just believe that the creator itself is an uncaused cause.
So we reiterated a couple times, but I'll just finish my statement here. Created ex nihilo.
Your statement, and then we'll.
Okay.
You've acknowledged that logic is objective. Well, we reiterated a couple times, but I'll just finish my statement here. We have acknowledged that you believe that logic is objective. So things like the law of non-contradiction, the argument from contingency, all of the entailments with objective logic would be necessary in and of themselves. Ultimately, it just seems like either you A, don't really subscribe to deism, or you're just not.
Let's see.
The law of non-contradiction, the argument from contingency, all of the believe that. Well, we reiterated a couple times, but I'll just finish my statement here.
Okay.
Move on to the next one.
All right, well, you've acknowledged that God is the source of all being. You've acknowledged that He created ex nihilo. You've acknowledged that
Sure.
logic is objective. Well, we reiterated a couple times, but I'll just finish my statement here. We have acknowledged that you believe that logic is objective. So things like the law of non-contradiction, the argument from contingency, all of the entailments with objective logic would be necessary in and of themselves. Ultimately, it just seems like either you A, don't really subscribe to deism, or you're just not familiar with the underlying logical baggage that is necessary for the arguments themselves.
Okay.
Let's see. So God is the source of all. Whoops. God is the source of all being. He created ex nihilo. So I agree with this. Well, I say that God is not the source of all being. I say that he is the cause of all being. He created ex nihilo. I'm pretty sure I do believe that. I think if I were to give anything, I wasn't sure whether or not I believed that, but the thing is I believe that the universe has a starting point. I believe that the scientists who say that the Big Bang is true and there is the universe has a starting point, that would mean that matter and energy had to come from nothing. Which I believe that the cause of that was God, perhaps fourth dimensionally, whatever the fucking case. So yeah, I would agree that, yeah, created ex nihilo. Sure.
And we'll be moving into the cross.
But, okay. Logic is objective. I still don't know how the fuck... all that logic is kind of like one of the fine-tuning things, right? How the universe is finely tuned in order to be able to be sustained or exist in the first place. Logic has three categories, or three laws that we've discovered. We could discover a fourth law of logic. I don't see how this has anything to do with God is relational. God would have simply taken logic is simply one of the things that God tuned to be to be the case, and then went flick, and that's it. Contingency. Yeah, his contingency argument is kind of strange to me, because I believe in contingency, and he's saying that, what exactly? Every cause has its effect, and every effect is dependent on its cause. I gave the example of the marker for that, and it's what I repeated 10 fucking times, that the creator is not... It is not necessary for a creator to sustain its creation. Anyway.
Cross exam for Bubba, or the cross exam for Bubba now. Once again.
So I want to say real quick what my strategy here was, because Sapphire accused me later of completely derailing into some unrelated shit. And let me go over really clearly what I was trying to show with my questions. Here's my list of questions, right? Sorry, bear with me. What I'm trying to show here is here's my questions right here. This is my note taking for everything that Sapphire was saying during my I wanted to get Sapphire to define 3 simple terms, which he could not do. Taco even said it in DMs. Sorry for people who think that Taco's unbiased, but I mean, you know. All Taco told me, he wasn't being unbiased during the debate, which is all that matters. But he said, oh yeah, Sapphire did not define relational being, which is the topic of conversation. Where are we? Where's my... Wait, oh, that's my defense. Here it is. Nope, that's my opening. I'm stupid. Here it is. So, look at this. Look at this over here. This is me writing down everything he says. So fuck anyone who says that I'm being bad faith. Define necessary. That's the first question that I asked. I said, Sapphire, I believe that something that is necessary is something that must be the way that it is. Do you agree? And then he agreed. And then I said, Sapphire, define a relational being. I believe that a relational being is a being that you can have a relationship with. But then he spent roughly 60 seconds trying to find a good definition for relational being. If you can't think of if you don't know what the definition of relational being is off the top of your fucking head, then why are you debating whether or not that God is a relational being? You don't even know what that fucking means. Like, you're gonna hear me type when I ask that question so much, because he said so much shit. And like, here's more shit. Here's more shit. God, Sapphire, define a personal being. I say that a personal being is a being whose relationships with other beings is personal or individual or subjective. And here's kind of what he said. He said a being with personhood. Okay, makes sense. Which would be a consciousness, a will, an intention, and a rational nature. Okay, makes sense. I can work with that. And I'll get to the points that people have accused me of derailing after like the first bit.
Let's be polite to each other. Bubba, you're in control of your cross-exam. Sapphire, please do your best to respond directly and concisely to his questions. Bubba, let me know when you're ready, and I'll start your timer.
Yep, I'm ready. 3, 2, 1, go.
Starting your timer now. You have 30 minutes.
All right, Sapphire, so I define something as necessary.
Okay, real quick. I want to show... That was Sapphire's cross, right? Bubba's cross. I want to count how many times Sapphire asks me a question during my cross.
To be something that must be the way that it is. Do you agree?
See? Yep.
Yeah, I have no problem with necessary. Yeah, necessary is the common definition.
So, I believe that a rational being is a being which you can have a relationship with. Do you agree?
Not necessarily.
What do you
think?
What do you think?
It's possible. But in terms of, as far as your question goes, I mean, I guess I could just let you follow up, but
no, I want to
I
use.
think I'm trying to preempt it.
No, I want to use your definitions for what you define before that. I only have 3 terms.
See, fuck anyone who says I'm bad faith. I'm saying I want to use your definition of relational being so that we can move forward. I want to know what you believe a relational being is so that we can come to an understanding.
Is it defined? And I want to know.
Well, you asked if it's if it's possible to have a relationship with a rational being, which I would argue is yes. I mean, we do
I didn't ask that. Is it possible to have a relationship with a rational being? I've asked one other question before. I said, what does necessary mean?
it all the time. There's all sorts of possible relationships that we have and don't have. I could become friends with someone tomorrow that I've never met. They're a rational agent. It's possible that could happen. It's possible that couldn't happen.
And yeah, I just say, like, would you say that a being which is relational means that you have the ability to have a relationship with it?
That's some Sapphire predicted the future, because that's where I asked the question that he accused me of asking.
No, not necessarily. Like, in one sense, relational would mean relationship, but relation, in terms of how I've been implying it, it's a type of fact. It's either true or false of two things. The relations connect distinct entities, and they involve the three critical components of the subject, the term, and the foundation. So it's not necessarily about interpersonal relation in that sense. A relation is that which connects those distinct entities in the way that I'm employing.
You can see my cat moving around in the background here.
Well, yes, the relationship. I just need a definitive definition to work with for relational being.
Yeah, so when I say that God is relational, I'm saying that God is connected to as a distinct entity to us, or the creation as another distinct entity. Not necessarily that God is, I'm not employing it in the sense, for the purposes of this argument, that me and God are buds or besties, and that we go get mimosas on Saturday, right? Relation is a correlative. So, for example, creator and creation is an example of a relation. It's not necessarily a relationship, but it's a relation in terms of the philosophical sense that I'm employing the term.
What would a personal being be then? What is a being which is personal?
A being that's personal.
I really wanted to move on to the next question. I really wanted to press him on this. Like, if I was being bad faith, I would have said, like, Sapphire, that just, like, I don't care whether or not what the relationship to God is to us for a relational being. I want to know what the actual definitive definition of relational is.
Be a being that has personhood. So not necessarily personal in the sense of, like, this is my personal can of Monster drink. That would denote ownership. That's a sense in which we could use the term, but the sense in which I employ personal being in terms of God, is I'm arguing that God has personhood.
Just here, real quick, define personhood, and then I can make a point and move on to the next set of questions.
So he's conscious with a will and an intention. A being that is a person is an individual it's an individual subsistence of rational nature.
Yeah, so something that Sapphire accused me of later is later on in a different VC, Sapphire accused me of being super disingenuous by claiming that I was giving Sapphire's definition to the guy who was asking the question in the Q&A period. It's because he answered me right here. Someone said, someone please define a relational or a personal being. And I said, oh, I can answer that for Sapphire. I wrote it down. See? It's right fucking here. You can't see that, but I can answer that.
A being, like I said...
I was a little quick to the draw, but Sapphire got really pissy with me later.
Desires. Personhood.
Okay, so what we're saying then, your claim in this debate is going to be that it is necessary, it must be the case that God is a being which can connect to other distinct entities and has personhood, which means as a being which is conscious with a will and intention and rational nature. Right?
Yeah, just reiterating what we've covered so far, yeah.
Yep, that's exactly what my purpose was, to reiterate what we have covered so far. Oops, yep. Like, look at my notes and tell me that, like, that's exactly what I wanted to do. Define necessary, define relational, define personal. And then repeat exactly what I said. So what you're saying is that it must be the case, because he agreed with me, it must be the case for God to be connected to other distinct entities and a being with personhood, with consciousness, a will and intention, and a rational nature. Now the next part, what is necessary for a creator? All that's necessary for a creator to create a creation, I consider it to be, you heard me say, a mind and the ability to create. In order for a watchmaker to make a watch, he has to have the knowledge to and the ability to create the watch. He agrees entirely with this, so I didn't even spend more than 60 seconds on this.
Yep, and so, you heard me say in my intro when I iterated it in the cross-exam from your end, that I believe that what is necessary for a creator to create its creation is that it has to have a conscious mind, and it has to have the ability to create. In other words, the watchmaker and the watchmaker has to have the knowledge to create the watch, and it has to have the ability to create the watch. And so I would say, what do you consider to be necessary for a creator to create a creation?
Those same sorts of qualities would be necessary, logically. The foreknowledge, the will, the intellect, like you said. God would have to be rational. God would have to have not just the knowledge of how to produce or the thing produced, but he would also have to have the desire to produce the thing.
Okay, cool. So everything I stated then, is there anything that you would add to the ability to create and the knowledge of how to create?
Not as far as you've asked up to this point, man.
Okay, cool.
I mean, shit, if Sapphire would go back in time, I'm sure that he would say that he would need the creator to sustain its creation. Because the watch and the watchmaker can sustain itself. The watch can sustain itself without a watchmaker for a very long period of time. So, if I was paying more attention, I would say, and I was like addressing what Sapphire was saying, like in the past, then I would say like, oh, Sapphire, what about sustainment, you fucking dick? Anyway.
Then I want to move to how you understand God to be, or into the Christian God.
Okay.
And I promise that this is relevant.
Okay, how many times did I say, I promise this is relevant? I promise this is relevant. I said it once.
It's like, do you believe that God is all powerful?
Well, unfortunately, I don't see what this has to do
I'll get to it.
with the argument that
Dude, I'm telling you it's relevant. We're gonna get to it. And let me say what I'm getting at, okay? The point of me bringing up, the reason it's analogous for me to bring up, oh, where'd my stuff go? My notes don't want to talk to me. Okay. The reason I'm asking, is God all-powerful? Is God all-knowing? Is God the Trinity? Is God relational? Is because in order for God to create the universe, this is all deism is saying. God created the universe. That's it. Nothing else. That means he doesn't have to be all-powerful. He doesn't have to be all-knowing, and he doesn't have to be a fucking Trinity. And one of those points is that it is not necessary for God to be powerful, all-knowing, the Trinity, or relational. So I'm using these examples, just 3 examples. And Sapphire got so pissed off and said so many times, I don't see how this is relevant. Why are you asking me these questions? I already said this. Dude, I'm promising you over and over again, if you just let me get to this point and this point, that I'm going to show you why it's relevant that I'm asking you these questions. Just fucking work with me, okay? I worked with you. I didn't ask Sapphire more than 3 clarifying questions during his cross-exam, but he went on to fucking ask me 1,000,000. Is it necessary that God must have these qualities in order to sustain, in order to create the universe, not sustain? And then if he said yes, I was going to say this, and if he said no, then he was going to say this.
as I laid out
Yep.
in my opening statement or in my cross examination.
Yep, I'm promising you that it'll be relevant.
Sure.
Too.
Yeah, God is all powerful.
Okay, how do you know that and why?
Well, God, in the sense that him being all powerful, has the power to do all things which are possible. He's not lacking in the ability to do those things that are logically possible. It's not like God can create a boulder that's too big for him to lift, because that would be logically incoherent.
I got annoyed because he gets really tautological. He likes to just keep repeating himself, and I was like, okay, got it, okay, got it.
I know, I'm saying, how do you know these things? How do you know that and why?
Well, I'm not doing a precept. I'm doing
I know, neither am I.
against deism. I'm arguing against deism.
I know, I'm saying,
All I needed him to say, and he did say it, was like, I'm not sure when he said it, but he said that God, the reason I know this is because it was revealed to me by God. That's all I needed.
arguing against theism right now, and I'm saying, how do you know that God is all powerful, and how do you know that?
Well, again, Bubba, I'm just trying to stay here. Like I said at the beginning, I'm not arguing personal revelation. I mean, I preempted this entire line. It feels like when I said that.
Yeah, this is where I kind of feel like a dick. He kept on saying, like, Bubba, I said in the beginning, I'm not arguing precept. And I'm not arguing that either. It's, all I'm doing is saying, like, I'm going to get to the point of either divine revelation or personal revelation, but he doesn't really like it that much. But I don't really care what you intended on coming here saying and coming here to talking about. I came here to talk about, there was a part in my debate where we talk about what type of revelation is necessary for knowledge to be obtained, which is kind of precept. It's like part of precept, but again, like, I'm not really running precept against Sapphire. I would never fucking, that'd be stupid.
And I'm not arguing miracles. I'm not arguing prayer. I'm not arguing divine revelation.
Did I say prayer? Did I say prayer yet up to this point?
I said all those things in my.
I say it eventually.
And just like you acknowleded in your opening statement, you said that those would be the way that I would have the knowledge of the God. You've already acknowledged it, but I've already said that I'm not. I haven't proposed those sorts of arguments.
I know, and I think is everyone who's in the audience right now, including me and Taco, knows that you're an Eastern Orthodox Christian. So when I promise you that when I'm asking you what you believe about God's nature, such as his all-powerfulness, his all-knowingness, his triune nature, I'm promising you that's going to be relevant in like 2 or 3 minutes if you just answer directly.
Yeah. I promise this is going to be relevant. I said it, repeated it 3 times.
So how do you know that God is all powerful?
Well, God is the source of all being, and the source of all being has to be able to do whatever is logically possible. Power is the ability to actualize potential. That is, to bring something into being or to sustain something in being. You have finite power. Limited beings can only actualize certain potentials. A builder can build a house, but he cannot create life. Right? You have infinite power. A being with infinite or unlimited power can actualize any potential that is logically possible. So if something is the source of all being, it must have the power to actualize all things that exist. If it lacks power over some aspect of reality...
I want to show something. Sapphire... So look how long it takes Sapphire to answer one of my questions, okay?
Unlimited power and potentials to sustain logically possible.
That God is all powerful.
Okay.
Well, God is the source of all being, and the source of all being has to be able to do whatever is logically possible. In the house, any potential that is logically possible. Power over some source of all being.
I just need a real quick...
That was I just skipped ahead, but that was a genuine 60 seconds. That was the timestamp 56:29, and he stopped at 57:30. 57:29. It took him 60 seconds of my time to answer that question. Now let's look back on how quickly I was answering his questions.
Because God is the source of all being, even in deism.
Yeah, God is the source, kind of like the watchmaker or the prime mover. And I don't, however, means that... I think that logic, for example, is self-sustaining. Like, logic is an objective truth, which can't really be broken in that way. And it doesn't need God to sustain it for it to be true.
But if he's the source...
That was 15 seconds. At double speed. Let's maybe look at another one. Maybe I'm just cherry picking.
Yep.
The
indirect and direct.
Indirect accidental, or the essential and direct, right?
Yeah. And you would be saying that God is essential. God is not essential under deism, but he is essential under theism and a relational God. And what you're providing to me right now is an external critique, which isn't going to really find any contradictions in my belief. It's just more or less going to be asserting yours onto mine.
That was 20 seconds. One more. Towards the end, when we're getting more heated.
For the fact that it was still created. Be sustained.
God is sustaining existence itself.
Yeah, every effect is dependent on its cause in order for that effect to exist, not to be sustained. The universe was caused by God, but it's not necessary for that cause to be sustained in order for the fact that it was still created and it exists.
You just said
that was 15 seconds. Sapphire just took 60 of my time.
Discussed and the arguments that I've actually made. The reason why I'm keeping it tight is it's logically necessary for God to be all powerful if he is the source of all being.
You can tell I'm getting annoyed. Like, stop talking. Answer directly.
I didn't question any of your questions when you were questioning me. For God to be all powerful because he has the ability to create creation.
Well, I'm trying to stick within the confines of the debate as far as what we've discussed and the arguments that I've actually made. The reason why I'm keeping it tight is it's logically necessary for God to be all powerful if he is the source of all being.
I didn't question any of your questions when you were questioning me. So if you cannot do the same, if you cannot do that for me, and
that's what I'm talking about. Sapphire took that long to answer my question and no time to answer, and I took no time. I took 15 seconds, maybe 30 at max, to answer his questions, but he's taking at least 60 on average to answer mine.
Well, if I'm questioning, I'm only just trying to, if I'm questioning, I'm only trying to clarify.
Okay, that's fine.
Just let me answer.
Okay, I'm letting you answer, but you're not answering. So, and the next thing is just like, I asked you about how do you know that he's all powerful? How do you know that he's all knowing? You know.
When did I start the question, how did you know he was all powerful? Because that must have taken 3 minutes to finally get some type of incoherent answer.
Okay.
Because it's logically necessary for God to be all powerful if he's the source of all being.
What makes it logical?
I don't know. If I were to really press him and be bad faith, I would press him on that like a dickhead.
Be necessary.
Well, power is the ability to actualize potential. If to bring something into being or to sustain something in being, for example, a being of unlimited power like God being all powerful. Sorry, excuse me for a second.
We had like a 15-second delay. You can hear in the background right here.
God being all powerful. Sorry, excuse me.
You hear that shit in the background? That's my fucking cat. That's this little shit. This little shit right here. Look, guilty. There was a bottle cap on the floor, and this little shit right here, this little shit, man, was playing with a bottle cap in the background, and I threw a rag at her. I was like, stop playing with that, you little shit. It's okay. She's a good girl.
Excuse me for a second. A being with unlimited power can actualize any potential that is logically possible. So again, it's a logical necessity. That's the argument that I'm making here. And how I know is precept. How I have access to knowledge in the first place is not really the form of the function of the structure of the debate. We're debating.
Yeah, so Sapphire would be right at face value as to like, how I am able to obtain knowledge is not the form of the debate. We're not doing precept here. I make it relevant. I think I'd make it relevant in like a few minutes.
Theism and whether or not God is relational.
Yeah, my next 2 or 3 questions are going to really make clear to you, I hope, as to why I'm asking you these questions. How do you know that God is a Trinity?
Well, I just don't see what the point of asking about the Trinity.
Stop
is.
questioning
Stop questioning my questions. What's the point
my
of
questions.
asking
Just answer them, please.
I am answering them. Like I said, the only reason I'd be asking questions is to get a firmer grasp on what you're coming, where you're coming from.
Yeah, here.
Just go ahead and respond directly.
Yeah. So that's the first time in how long? About 12. Me and Sapphire have been in my cross-examination for about 12 minutes. That's the first time that Taco said anything. And people want to say that Taco's like super biased towards me. He's running interference, trying to take down, because he fucking hates Sapphire and he hates presups, and Sapphire's a presup. Well, no, there's like Sapphire. No, Taco probably spoke during my cross-exam 3 times, and that was the first time.
Why is it necessary for God to be a Trinity?
No, how do you know that God is a Trinity?
I'm on the affirmative here. You're on the negative.
I know.
What does that? Stop questioning my fucking questions. Just answer the question.
I'm saying to you, and I asked Taco for some time back, because I'm telling you, I promise that this is going to be relevant in like another question or two, and you keep questioning my questions. So please, just like, how do you know that God is a Trinity?
I don't believe that's necessary.
That's the point which blew my mind, that any Eastern Orthodox Christian such as Sapphire would say, I don't believe that the Trinity is necessary. And then there was a misunderstanding right after, because I looked over this part before. There was a misunderstanding in my next question. What I was asking Sapphire was, do you think that the Trinity is necessary for creation? But he thought that I said, do you think that the Trinity is necessary at all?
You don't believe it's necessary for God to be a Trinity? Okay, so no, you don't believe it's necessary in order for him to create the universe, right?
That's what I said. I said, you don't think that it's necessary for God to create the universe. What I meant was, you don't think that it's necessary for God to be a Trinity in order to create the universe. What he thought I meant was, you don't believe it's necessary for God to create the universe.
Now, we've already acknowledged what my necessary beliefs are.
No, that he has to be all powerful, he has to be all knowing.
And it's not because I don't believe that God is a Trinity, but the Trinity is revelational knowledge, which I stated at the beginning of my opening statement. I'm not discussing.
And if I ask you,
He's gonna discuss it with her. I'm basically gonna pull him into this conversation, kicking and screaming. Like, we're gonna talk about how you are able to obtain knowledge. I said so in my opening, and then he gives me a lot of shit for not addressing any of the things that he said in his opening. He didn't understand a single thing I said in my opening either, because I said that we're gonna talk about how we obtain knowledge in my opening.
questions about how, if I ask you that if you're getting all this information because you rationalize it, then you kind of have to answer that question.
The Trinity is not something we rationalize to. It's revealed knowledge.
Okay, revealed knowledge from where?
Obviously from my God.
Cool. Well, we'll get into that next. And then final question: is God relational? And how do you know?
Did I miss a question? I had a question right after that. Oh, I did miss a question, a very important one.
But I'm not arguing for revealed knowledge.
You're arguing for that God is relational.
Yes, and relations are, as I've defined earlier, not relation as you are trying to either get me to define or trying to switch the definition to. When you asked me at the very beginning of this cross-referencing...
Sapphire, you're filibustering too much, please.
I'm not filibustering.
Please directly answer.
Insofar as I have defined relation as connecting distinct entities, yes, it's necessary that God being the creator is relational to the creation.
It is necessary for God to be relational to the creation. For sustainment, right? And I've disproved that. I didn't really make it too clear during the debate itself.
Insofar as I have defined it for the purpose of this debate, not as however you would like me to define it.
Right. And
I'm not trying to make him define why it's necessary. I'm just trying to say, is it at all? Yes or no?
Is it necessary that God must have all these qualities except for the Trinity?
I didn't miss it. I thought I missed this question. Is it necessary that God must have all these qualities in order to create the universe?
So, is it necessary that God must have these qualities in order to create the universe?
Yes, it's logically necessary for God to be all-powerful if he is the source of all being.
And how do you... How is that information revealed to you?
Well, much in the same way that information has been revealed to you, apart from, like I've said, the things I'm not debating. I'm not proposing...
Sure, if you're going to say that it's in the same way that I would have that knowledge revealed to me,
Questioning my questions. Like, shut the fuck up and answer, dude.
Say it's through my own personal revelation. Do you say the same thing?
Again, I've already defined personal. So
this is where I skipped ahead and I got a little bit excited.
I don't know how you're employing the term if you're using it the same way that I've defined it.
I'm employing the term like this because what me and you both have is a theory.
Okay, this is where I really made... This could have been my conclusion, to be honest. I said, what me and Sapphire have is a theory. And I'm going to skip ahead because I'm going to say it here. What me and you have, Sapphire, is a theory. And I have a debate that I had with Josie very recently. And I'm going to upload it very soon. Where Josie explained this to me. A theory that holds more utility is one that gives us new information about the universe, holds a lot of explanatory scope. So that's what I'm kind of yapping about here. What it seems like to me is you've taken deism and added a bunch of unnecessary qualities, tacked them onto God in order to soothe your Christian narrative, your Christian paradigm. I'm curious, why would you hold to these theories other than being a Christian? Because it doesn't seem to provide any explanatory scope, and it doesn't seem to give us any new knowledge about the universe. And as a matter of fact, creates more problems than it solves.
A theory that says that God created the universe.
Okay, I must skip, because that's exactly what I just said here.
The only reason that it seems to me that you've added these questions is not even necessary. So I'm curious if you can provide any one of those things that I just said with...
Yep, and I'm curious if you can provide any one of those things, such as explanatory... Can you provide explanatory scope or new information about the universe that would be obtained under the idea that God is a Trinity, all-powerful and all-knowing?
With the theory that God
So
is relational.
The only thing that I said that would be necessary is that his person.
Not powerful and all-knowing. Can you provide any explanatory scope or new information about the universe with the information that God is relational?
Being that he is a conscious mind with a will and an intellect, and that he's all-powerful, meaning that he has the ability to actualize all things that are logically possible. Those are the things that I've stated are necessary for the God.
I want to see if you're listening. What was the question I just asked you?
I don't know.
I said, can you...
That's such a sleazy tactic that I use in debates. It's like, what did I just ask you? And Sapphire is guilty now of saying, oh, I don't fucking know. So you weren't paying attention. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? I do that a lot, and you could notice it in my debates. What did I just ask you?
Provide.
And that he's all-powerful, meaning that his personhood, being that he is...
theory that God
so
is relational.
The only thing that I said that would be necessary is that his personhood, being that he is a conscious mind with a will and an intellect, and that he's all-powerful, meaning that he has the ability to actualize all things that are logically possible. Those are the things that I've stated are necessary for the God.
I want to see if you're listening. What was the question I just asked you?
I don't know.
I said, can you provide any explanatory scope or new information that's revealed about the universe because of these qualities? Because God is all-powerful, it reveals this about the universe.
That's where I fucked up. I fucked up there. I said, can you provide any new explanatory scope or new information about the universe with the fact or the theory that God, who created us, is relational? And his answer should... Not that he's all-powerful. I just said all-powerful. I should have said relational.
Actually, yeah, because, like I said in my earlier argument, I think
it's because he has to sustain.
You understand, based on, from your deistic worldview, the logical entailments that are involved with the system. So what I can provide, as far as, like, what's utility, I don't believe utility is fully described as how you've narrowly defined it. I think utility is,
I haven't defined
perfectly...
utility.
I think, yeah, you did.
No, I didn't. I said that in order for a theory to maintain utility, it would have a couple of these things.
Okay, so, again, I don't think that,
I think he got confused there. I was like, what? Yeah, I think Sapphire just made a what face. Like, what?
I don't really subscribe to, your issue here. I don't understand, like, what your problem is as far as, keeping things within the scope of the debate, arguing with the arguments that I've actually made, rather than trying to...
Yeah, he's questioning my questions. Like, dude, the reason I asked you all those previous questions is because of the statement that I just made. The statement that I just made about the theory providing no explanatory scope, it provides no new information about the universe, and you're tacking all these things onto deism, is why I was asking you, how do you know that God is a Trinity, all-powerful and all-knowing? It was 3 simple questions that, Sapphire, if you had just answered them directly, then we wouldn't be in this debacle.
So it sounds like he's trying to build an argument. Go ahead and respond to his question, right?
Taco gets it.
Here, I can provide what I just said and why it's relevant. I said that Sapphire seems to have taken deism, the necessary qualities of God, and tacked on these new qualities of God.
I mean, I can read my own mind, can't I? It was like, past
such
Bubba
as
is so
being
smart.
relational, the point of the debate. You've tacked on this quality that is not necessary. It doesn't provide any new explanatory scope about knowledge of the universe. And okay, then that's the question, and that is the question that I'm asking you. What is the explanatory scope of saying that God is relational?
And apparently he understands the question very well, but did I just mute it? No. He understands the question by acknowledging that just here. Like this right here, when he gets up to stretch and shit.
The universe. And
yes, it does. It does provide explanatory scope. So I would infer that means that you understand why I was asking you those questions then. Now you understand why I was asking you, why is God the Trinity? Why is God all-powerful? Why is God all-knowing? Because I'm seeking to know how that provides any explanatory scope that saying that God is not relational doesn't. It doesn't seem that adding on any unnecessary qualities onto God provides any explanatory scope or new information about the universe that is coherent.
Okay, then that's the question, and that is the question that I'm asking you. What is the explanatory scope of saying that God is relational, or is necessary for him to be relational?
Because, like I've said, I argued that God is a sustainer.
And I reject that, and I've said why probably 3 times now in this video, not in the debate.
I have argued from the entire time that it's necessary for God to be relational. I've argued in terms, again, I'll just remind you of my definition. The relation is to be understood.
I remember it. You don't need to rehash your definitions. I just need you to answer my
Okay,
question.
good. So what exactly hasn't been answered to your satisfaction here, bro?
Fuck, where would I begin? But hey, asking a question during my debate, during my cross-exam.
So far, what you said is that it's necessary for God to sustain
But I mean, that's actually a fair question. But still, take it out of the West. It's funny.
in the universe, because you view the universe in the analogy of like a light in a light bulb, and I reject that because I said
It's logically necessary for him to have these qualities. You understand that?
Because
you said logic was objective.
and we're not going back.
We're not going back to his. He should have asked me that in your cross.
asked me that in the cross-examen, which you did actually, and I responded, and I responded, and that means that this question has been asked and answered.
So stick to it.
And I have been very consistent. I believe
Yeah, logic, again, I really don't. This is the only part that I don't understand up to this point. Why is it that logic is objective? That must mean that the God is sustaining it. What?
the universe is like the watch and the watchmaker, the builder in the building. You believe that the universe is like the light in the light
But
bulb.
those things don't
You
hold
believe
up
that the universe is like the light in the light bulb. And I'm
Which is
saying
logically
that but it doesn't provide any new explanatory scope about the universe.
Maybe I should just add that here. God doesn't sustain his creation.
Verse.
God is the builder in the building, not the light in the light bulb.
Yeah, the builder in the builder is false.
That deism, you said because it's necessary for God to sustain his creation, and I reject that premise from the beginning.
No, you didn't reject the premise. You said every effect has its cause, and every effect has its cause, and every effect is
That doesn't mean that I accept the premise. Yeah, every cause has its effect.
dependent upon its cause. You didn't reject anything needing to be sustained. You're just ignoring the logical entailments of your own argument.
So this
Makes
is
no
stuff
sense.
for you to bring up in the conclusion, but right now he's asking the questions.
Okay, and we can.
I'm answering it.
I haven't asked you a question in like the last 5 minutes. It's I made a promise in my intro, and I want to see if I can fulfill that promise. Sapphire.
Okay, so this is where we get to this is the precept part that Sapphire didn't want to get into. This is sort of like, it was the very end of my notes. That's actually why I kind of conceded the rest of my time. Why is it so far down? Damn. Yeah, just this part, just 2 questions. What kind of revelation do you use to establish truth about reality? He said, and it blew my mind because that means I can use both points. He said that it's divine and personal. That's so not coherent with Eastern Orthodoxy. And it made me laugh. I know I was holding back from laughing in the middle of the debate because I didn't want to just laugh in his face. He would get pissed off. But like, it's either divine. No, in Eastern Orthodoxy, all knowledge is given to you because of God. All knowledge is divine revelation. So then how can you possibly, when I asked him, what kind of revelation do you use to perceive about reality? He said, where is it? Divine and personal. And I'm going to play him saying this. In other words, how do you know that logic, and then how do you know that that revelation is trustworthy? That's the questions that I said that I was going to ask in my intro. I know I didn't play my intro in this video, but I said that I was going to ask that question right here. And from here, how do you know that logic exists? Let's see. If he said that it was a divine revelation, then I was going to say, then your faith in God is equivalent to your trust in God is equivalent to my trust in my sense perception and my rationale. Your trust in God is the same as my trust in my rationale and sense perception. So, if he said that it was a personal revelation, then your logic is circular and based on faith just like mine. So, he said divine and personal experiences. So that means I could say both. Which, the point that I'm trying to drive home here is that theism, God being relational, is a tacked on unnecessary quality which provides absolutely zero explanatory scope to explain the known universe. And for that, this video is getting too long. It's 100 minutes long. And I'm going to play the end of me asking these questions, and then I'll move on.
What kind of revelation do you use to establish truth about reality?
I'll skip the conclusions. It's fine.
There's multitudes of truth. There are multitudes of methods I use to establish truth about reality.
Yep, what type of revelation do you use?
Use divine revelation, my personal sense perception, my experiences, and again, all the arguments that I've posited. I use logic.
Look at me, I'm
all the arguments that I've
smiling.
posited.
Look at me, I'm holding back laughter.
Personal sense perception, my experience.
Oh, that's great. I love it. Oh shit. My dorky laugh, or my dorky smile. I was like, yes.
Experiences, And again, all the arguments that I've posited, I use logic and reason, but all the arguments that I've posited up to this point are not being contended with.
Do you remember what I said in my intro about me using circular reasoning?
It's funny that you're running from the arguments that have been
You're not
posited
making
to
arguments.
create an argument.
You're not making arguments. I'm asking you questions. How do you know that this revelation that you received, personal and divine, is trustworthy?
Now, are you cross-examining my arguments?
Stop asking fucking questions. Let me drive this home to make you look like a dipshit.
Or
Stop
are
asking me
you-
questions, Sapphire. Answer mine. How do you know that this revelation that was given to you is trustworthy?
I'm really in tune with myself.
Much like you would say, because I believe in my trustworthiness. I believe in my self-perception. I believe I'm deluded
Both, bro.
or whatever. It's important, dude.
And then your logic is circular, based on faith, just like mine.
And
And I love that face he made.
So your logic is circular, based on faith, just like mine.
and
So what you just
so that we're on the same level.
what you conceded to is
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly it. He made the point for me.
that your worldview on theism provides no explanatory scope that deism doesn't. Me and you are on.
does.
You're right on the same level. And this is where I'm going to make my final
It
statement.
does, actually.
This is where I'm going to make my final statement and concede the rest of my time because what Sapphire's just admitted.
This is the part where Sapphire didn't get. When I concede the rest of my time, that means you shut the fuck up and let me make my final statements. My time is over. Let's look at what happened when Sapphire was out of time for himself. Notice how I shut the fuck up. Even though he was basically attacking me during the end of his time, I kept my mouth fucking shut. He doesn't know how to do that.
Go ahead and finish up your statement, and then we'll move on to the next one.
All right, well, you've acknowledged that God is the source of all being. You've acknowledged that He created ex nihilo. You've acknowledged that logic is objective. Well, we reiterated a couple times, but I'll just finish my statement here.
Notice how I am silent and shutting the fuck up during his final statements, because if I said something and I was like, Sapphire, that's not what I said. That's not true. You're straw-manning me. Then we would just get back into the debate, and I would be adding more time onto him.
We have acknowledged that all of the entailment don't really use for the arguments themselves.
And I can notice how I kept silent. That's the point that I'm making. And now my time is up. I'm conceding my time. Let's see what Sapphire does.
We're in the same boat, as he just said.
In order
Is
to
that-
get
I'm
out
making my
of
final.
my
I concede my
reality.
time. His trustworthy sense perception is that we are in the same boat, as he just said. That his logic is circular. You're right, on the same level. And this is where I'm going to make my final
It does
statement.
actually.
This is where I'm going to make my final statement and concede the rest of my time.
Concede the rest of my time.
Because what Sapphire's just admitted by saying that his logic is circular, just like mine, he has faith in his trustworthy sense perception, is that we are in the same boat, as he just said.
In order
Is that-
to get
I'm
out
making my
of
final.
my
I concede my
reality.
time, Sapphire. This is where you stop talking. I just make my final
Well,
statement.
I'm answering the question you asked.
I'm not asking you a question anymore.
You did. You asked me. You asked me how I.
Sapphire, this is Bubba's cross-exam.
Yeah, I haven't asked you a question.
It is his prior question.
I have-
It is the answer to his prior question.
The last question I asked you is, how do you know that the revelation is trustworthy? After you
Yeah,
answered, I conceded the rest of my time and I'm making final statements now. Because
In order to doubt that my mind maps onto reality, I have to
Imagine trying to make your final statements, and you have this fucking dingus
assume that to be the case.
talking shit, just talking shit.
And what you just admitted is that you have no more explanatory scope than I do. You both trust in your knowledge because it's trustworthy, and me and you are in the same boat. And if your faith in God gives you trustworthy sense perception, just like my own, it's on the same level as mine. And
That's not all I said.
there's nothing about your
Dude, stop talking.
theism that provides any more explanatory scope than mine. And there's nothing else to say at that point.
All right. That was a good review. Like, I do actually understand more. And I don't, so this is gonna, I'll close everything right here. Yeah, so to make a second conclusion to this debate, oh, can I put this over here? I'll just put myself over. To just kind of like, yeah, I think that the debate, again, I still, after a complete rewatching, taking notes, and all this shit, I'll move to the side. Taking notes and all this shit, like, I still don't understand if I were to talk to Sapphire again, which I probably will after this video's made, what is the logical reason as to why it is necessary for God to sustain the creation? How do you know for certain? How are you so certain that God is like the sun and the light bulb and the light? And because I am clearly saying the most accurate thing that Sapphire said about my worldview so far. Under your worldview, God wound up its creation like a watch and then set it on its own course. That's exactly what I believe. I believe that the universe is the building. I believe that God is the builder. He set it on its own course. And this God didn't create some self-sustaining... The self-sustaining principle would be the material of the universe itself. The essence of all the natures of the universe that make it what it is. That is what makes the universe able to sustain itself. I fail to see the reasons that he did give me were because God is the source of all being. But that's confusing. I say God is the cause of all being. So if he's saying that as the source, I would be more specific. He created ex nihilo. Yeah, God creating ex nihilo. I think I agree with that. This is something that's kind of new to me. It's to say God created ex nihilo, that just means that the universe had a cause and all the some things had to be created out of nothing. That makes sense to me, actually. Logic is objective. Don't know what that's like pointing out gravity to me. Nope, I just realized you can't see. That's like pointing out that gravity is the way that it is. Yeah, me and you, Sapphire, both have a perfect explanation as to the fine-tuning argument. I believe that logic and the laws of logic are just like one of those things like gravity, which is explained by God creating it. Contingency. Yeah, his contingency argument I make clear with the marker. It is necessary for a sustained principle to be sustained by something. I reject that. Contingency doesn't imply that. A cause can... it was this right here. Every effect is dependent on its cause. Every effect is dependent on its cause in order to exist, not to be sustained. The reason that this marker right here is dependent, it's dependent on its cause in order for it to exist. It doesn't need the creator in order to continue to existing. It's not like if the creator of this marker dies, then the marker ceases to exist. That's not how the universe works, I believe. Apart from that, in my cross-examine, the thing that I believe I proved is that, yes, relationality to God is an unnecessary quality that has been tacked on to the creator God, that is unnecessary and provides no extra new information about the universe, no new information. It's like sustainment is not true. Sorry, Sapphire. But no explanatory scope about the universe, no new information about the universe or anything. And that's what really Sapphire was really trying to push down my throat. But it just didn't work, and he didn't give me a logical reason other than a creation is dependent to be sustained by its creator. That's not how it works. So that'll be the end. That'll be the end of this one. This was fun. I intend to do more of these more often. All right, bye.